Alex Garland's supposed war film, Civil War, is a love letter to modern media, or media gone by, because let's face it, there are not a whole lot of these reporters still out there doing any kind of actual journalism, photojournalism, or even long-form stories. We have a problem in this country, and writing a love letter to something that doesn't exist anymore doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, we can set all that aside and just focus on this thing as a movie, because I saw the movie, so you don't have to. And I'm sure you've seen tons of reviews, and one of the things I'll tell you is it's not woke. It's not even remotely intersectional. It just isn't a very good film. There are some good elements, and we'll talk about that. So stick around. Here we go. Let's start at the point where this is a film. It is a kind of a depiction of what war is. It's something nonsensical, and that actually says a lot about this film. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I was taken aback by the fact that there really isn't any through line other than the actual reporters going into the battle here in the United States, or some version of the United States. And there are the things that you've seen in the trailer, and I will tell you, the trailer is misleading. I will say that the film itself visually is beautiful. It's well done. It's shot well. There are a lot of big scenes with set pieces that are impressive. The film was the most expensive film A24 has ever done, and you can see it on the screen. At the same time, it had excellent sound design, fantastic soundtrack, and the things that make good movies good. But at the same time, it had the things that make bad movies bad. Like a bunch of characters you don't have a whole lot of backstory to, which sometimes works, but these characters are on a nonsensical quest to get from point A to point B. They're not embedded reporters, so they're out there doing independent work, which seems like they're in the most difficult and dangerous place imaginable. There's no outline for why this is happening. They don't even hint towards what has happened previously to cause events like this to unfold. You would think that in a film like this, you would start out with, some kind of, banner at the front that tells you what's going on, a crawl, even if you want to steal something from Star Wars or better properties, but they didn't even bother. You're thrown into the middle of a conflict that looks like other events that have taken place around the world in recent history. They're putting them all together in one place in the United States. And I'll say something very complimentary, which I don't normally do after praising the sound design and, of course, the soundtrack and how beautiful this was shot. I'll also praise the performances. What little we got from the actors was very good for the most part. There are moments that are powerful. That's probably the most resonating word that I can use to describe individual scenes. The problem is the scenes were strung together in an incoherent way, and the outright murder of a couple of journalists for nonsensical reasons by people who we don't understand their motivations because everything is out of context. We are treated to just event after event after event that don't seem to be linked. Other than the people that are assembled, their motivation to get from point A to point B is to cover the end of the war, with the president losing and the Western forces winning, which it seems, like that would probably be the outcome that would come to pass, since the majority of the country, resides in the middle, and it's only the outside edges, the outskirts, that are trying to enforce their will, their way of life on the greater country as a whole. So in that sense, the film could have made sense. The problem is, based on our political situation, as far as how everything's broken down in the United States, it's just California and Texas getting together to go east, and Florida going north, maybe, but we have no context for why that makes sense. And again, this film really seems to be about what it should be about, which is war is not the answer. War isn't good. War shouldn't be the only option. War should never come about, but it does, because ultimately conflicts of such enormity oftentimes only have a way of forced outcome that leads to these kinds of conflicts. And again, that's the way it is in this world, and has been since the dawn of man told history. But there's a lot of nonsense in here as well, like why you are emotionless by the end of it when you take a picture of one of your colleagues who was shot and killed trying to protect you. That's very strange. And then taking the ultimate shot, kind of in a way of mimicking your hero, the person that just saved your life, starting their career, their notoriety in the industry. Not that you're going to have the same kind of industry that you've ever had, because after this kind of a conflict, there are going to be some other ramifications that come about because of this. And, you know, spoiler alert, you know, the Western forces win in the end. I'm not sure how much of a spoiler that was. I think it's been all around. This is one you don't have to see. And I don't think you should waste your time in seeing it, perhaps when it comes to streaming. But there is no rewatchability here, because you're going to realize how little substance there is to this after, well, a few hours of pondering what you just watched. Because there is no reason to have watched this film. So without further ado, I want to get to the ratings, and I'll try to tell you why I think what I think about this movie. If you're judging on a scale of 1 to 10, this film sits at a 6, because it's not terrible. It's not full of a bunch of politics. In fact, the absence of politics is something that I would normally celebrate. But because there isn't any understanding of what went in baking this cake, I don't know how much enjoyment you're going to get out of the cake. I certainly didn't get anything out of the lack of politics, and I have no understanding about why I should be rooting for one side versus the other, or why they seem to abandon their journalistic ethics when they embed with, you know, the Western forces at the end. They're not really embedded, but they just show up and are protected by them when they go into the White House. So none of that makes sense. So it's a 6 out of 10 because it doesn't make a lot of sense. But it also is a 6 out of 10 because it had some decent elements in it that have been lacking in a lot of films lately. So 6 out of 10 gives you what? Well, it gives you, I'm going to give it, and this is going to be hard for me, but I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. Because it's an average movie. It's the average of what we have today. If I was 20 years back, this would have been a 1-star film, maybe 1.5. But based on what we have now, it's average. It's a 3. And that's about as good as it gets nowadays, with very rare exception. Hopefully next weekend, when I'm talking about the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, we'll talk a little differently about that film, considering how many good things I've heard about it recently. As I said before, overall, I would not waste your time with this one. If you want to see a compelling war film that tells you the horrors of war and the reasons we shouldn't go into it on a whim, or we shouldn't engage in these kinds of activities on behalf of others, you know, because of some, you know, political motivation at the time. There are much better films that do that. Saving Private Ryan is a fantastic, you know, treatise on why you don't want to go into war and the horrors of it and all the bad things that happen and the heroic events it takes to do one thing right. This didn't even give you that satisfaction. So go out there, find something better. I mean, heck, there's a lot of John Wayne films out there you probably would enjoy and you've never seen. On that note, once again, I saw a movie, so you didn't have to, and please don't go see this movie. Until next time, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, and see ya!
You're welcome to the CultureCasino, where it's all about the dough. We're talking box office, baby, just so you know. The big winners and losers from Hollywood's finest. We're breaking it down, no need to rewind this. We're breaking it down, no need to rewind this. Monday morning, we're catching up on the digits. Who took the top spot and who had to pivot? Millions in ticket sales, we're talking moolah. And if it tank, well, they might call it a flop full of box office rap, that's what we're about. Culture Casino, bringing the cloud. The highs and the lows, we're spitting the style.